Welcome. This video is designed to help give some guidance and assistance to those of you interested in running as a state or district FFA officer in the state of Alabama this year. There have been some changes to the application this year, and I do want to apologize up front. We had every intention of having a new electronic application in place this year, and I know for a lot of you advisors and students, you've heard that. Unfortunately, the application is just not ready. And instead of trying to rush it out and not have enough time to properly train teachers and students about what it looks like, what's expected, we decided to go with something that's more similar to what you're used to seeing. So there have been minor changes to the previous year's application, which is what I want to share with you now, as long as some other resources we've developed that I feel are very important to helping you be successful in this process. So if you are on, we'll go to our website at alabamaffa.org and navigate to the resources page. If you will scroll down until you see officer resources, this is where you're going to find all the resources you need to be successful in this process. So if you'll click on officer documents, you'll see a lot of new things here. The first thing I want to draw your attention to is this Alabama Officer Candidate Handbook. This is a newly developed handbook which will lay out all like expectations, all duties. It lays out a lot of resources for officer candidates, and what we will use moving forward to gauge the job an officer is doing, what's expected once again of them, and how we will handle procedures. So this document is incredibly important if you are choosing to run as a district or state officer this year. So when you open that document up, I'm not going to go over it all with you, but it is expected that each person that decides to submit an application, please review this document. There are signature pages at the end, and if you are fortunate enough to make a district or state officer team, all of that paperwork will be expected. So once again, this lays out things like your qualifications. Are you qualified to run in the first place? Have you met the minimum requirements? And then what does being an officer look like? What are some expectations? How will I be held accountable as an officer? We have an accountability system in place now for how we will deal with different situations that arise. Also, what does the selection process look like? What does interviews look like? There's an appendix and also an officer agreements. So as I scroll through, just kind of feel free to go look at this in detail. It's very important, once again, that you know what you're stepping into when you apply and that you agree that these are things you can do and that you plan to do as an officer, including especially this accountability piece. Once again, the process. Now, don't read too much into this process yet. Once again, we had every intention of having a new electronic application out, and unfortunately, it's just not ready. So this part will not be relevant until next year as far as what the state and district application looks like. But the rest of this is pretty standard. Talks about how we do interviews and how the points breakdown works and that sort of thing. There's also an appendix with general resources in there for students, just a quick reference guide, a calendar that walks you through what a year in the life of an officer may look like, whether it's a state or a district officer. We also have the state scorecards we use. Once again, when you get down to the scorecard for the application, this is designed to work around the new application, which will be out in 2022. So please disregard this and refer to a document I'm going to share with you in a minute. There's also rubrics for the writing prompt, sample travel, that kind of thing. And then this section is incredibly important. This is the officer agreements. A lot of this will look familiar to those of you who have applied in the past or have students apply. We have a waiver in here that needs to be read and signed. And this just is giving us permission to use pictures, videos, giving you permission to travel with us and to be at things in the world we live in now. This is incredibly important for us to have. Just giving us permission to do the things we need to do. As well as this familiar, this is for your medical and your proof of driver's insurance, auto insurance, something that was in the old application. Now it's in this handbook. You won't find it in the new application. So all of this we're asking for only if you get elected. And then finally, a agreement that you have read this handbook, that you agree with it when you sign up, and that you agree that you're going to do the things we're asking you to do. So all of these three documents will need to be signed and returned only if a student makes the team. So once again, officer handbook, incredibly important. Next, let's take a look at the application changes. So this application is downloadable and you can type in it, and it's encouraged that you do type it and return it. Some big differences while we're opening the application is in the past, this application had to be mailed in to your district specialist. This year, we're asking you simply to email this in. You can email that to any of your district specialists. If you're South District, it will come to me at jared.dice@alsde.edu. If you're Central District, it'll go to Mr. Adcock at colin.adcock@alsde.edu. And if you're Mr. Chamness in the North, it'll go to jchamness@alsde.edu. So here's the new application. Once again, this top part is new. It's just stating what I kind of just walked you through about reviewing the officer candidate handbook, and that those documents that you typically had to have signed and turned in with the application are no longer needed unless you were selected as an officer. So we will collect that paperwork at our first meeting once you've been selected. There's no need to get all the signatures up front. Other big changes you will see is we no longer have dual candidates. It will be either you will declare as a district or state officer. That was voted on by the executive committee last year, and it's going to open up a lot of opportunities that we don't have dual candidates, because we can start training sooner and developing our officer team. Other than that, not a lot has changed with this top section. One change you'll see is just a little bit different with this question about other activities you're involved with, and we want to know how you plan to balance your time. As running as an officer, we expect this to be a priority. We know you're very busy. We know a lot of our students are very bright and involved with other organizations, other jobs. But once again, when you sign up for this, you are signing a commitment to FFA, and we want to know that that is a commitment you're going to honor, and that we're going to get out of you what this organization needs to grow our members. So please fill that out with great detail. Then you come down here. This is all standard from year to year. One thing I will say is, just because there are only 5 boxes in a given area does not mean you cannot add to this. You can feel free to add as much as you want. I would encourage you to add and delete as you need. This is, once again, something you can fill out and edit. So filling in this section in incredible detail is important. The offices you've held as an FFA member, any career development event, leadership development events you've been in, other activities, leadership. Have you been to the state convention or national convention? Have you been to maybe the Alabama Winter Alumni Conference or another one of our conferences? That's a great place to put that there. Community activities you're involved with outside of FFA. Any community service you've done, it would be a great place to put that as well. School activities outside of FFA. And then other experiences you've had meeting the public. A big job of a state and district officer is to serve as a representative for our organization. So we want you to be able to go out and represent us well, and you're going to meet a lot of people. So any experiences you've had where you've had to go out and speak with people and make those relationships, we want to know about. And finally, awards and recognitions received. Don't forget about your certainly your FFA degrees of advancement here, and other awards you may have received outside of FFA even here. This is also a new section here. In the world we live in, it's imperative that if you are signing up to be an officer, you're willing to represent us well. And what you do in your personal time through your social media is a direct representation of us at the association organization if you're an FFA officer. So we want to make sure you understand the gravity of being appropriate in your posts and representing you, your family, school, and our association well. So we ask that you just provide your basically your screen name, your login name, whatever you go by on these social media platforms. If you don't have one of these, just put not available. Um, so we ask that you just put whatever it is you go by, the name you go by on these social media accounts, because we do, you know, we want to be able to monitor that you are promoting the organization, you're promoting yourself and us in a very positive manner. Next is another big change that you've seen this question before, but it has changed a little bit. Supervised agriculture experience is a huge part of agri-science education. So we wanted to give a little more detail to it. As we move into next year's electronic application through AET, your records will be critical, that you are keeping records in AET. And next year's application will pull your record books from AET. So that will be how we gauge your SAE. Right now, we're asking that you provide a detailed description of your supervised agriculture experience. You may have multiple projects. You can type as much as you would like here, but we would like details. We would like to see how you're growing in that project and how it is encouraging you and how it's impacting your future. So please provide a very detailed description here of your supervised agriculture experience. That's a little different than years past where they've asked for a brief description, but something that is one of our three circles in the three circle model we feel deserves a little more emphasis. And then finally, you see similar things, your member statement concerning your qualifications as an officer. Please make this relevant to the job. You should have read the handbook at this point and have some idea what you're signing up for. Make sure that your statement is relevant to the job you plan to do as an officer. It is great that you are trustworthy and that you are a wonderful, hardworking person, but give detail here. Talk about how you plan to impact your district or state officer team and our state as a whole. And once again, you have feel free to go more than this page. Like I always say, though, keep the application neat as you expand and take away from the different areas. And finally, your advisor statement. Please encourage your advisor, or if an advisor, if you're listening to this, please take the time to do a good job on your candidate statement. Obviously, you think enough of them to let them run and to promote them to run. So take the time once again to talk about the qualifications they have that would make them a great officer and why the district or state team would be lacking without them. And that is the end of the application now. Once again, all that other stuff, all the other pages that used to be in here are now in the officer candidate handbook. So refer to those there. And once again, we don't need any signed pages unless you make the team. So you can just fill this in, save it, and email this application to your district specialist. Next thing I want to share with you is we do have some scoring rubrics that should help. This kind of helps. This is what our judges will receive, and this is a great thing to review as you're working through your application. So work through and find, how do I get those high points on my application? We break down each area that is scored on the application. So just as you work through this, find what works for you and try to make sure you're hitting these marks. This is how people do one great job on applications by looking at rubrics. So we encourage you, your member statement right here, it talks about some things we're looking for, advisor statements, and it breaks down the points each section will be worth. And then on the interview, you will be asked several interview questions. This is kind of how judges are being asked to score your responses to their questions. You may get asked 12 questions in an interview, or 9 or 10, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But just kind of know the things you need to do. Is your official dress correct? How comfortable are you in a room? How is your speaking voice? And finally, you'll have a written response. In all three districts this year, we'll have a written response at the interview. So That could be an email, it could be a letter, it could be any kind of thing, just a written correspondence that will be scored, and this is how that will be scored as well. So, another great resource there. And finally, the last resource we want to share with you is just kind of a blank score sheet so you can see what our judges are seeing. Once again, this breaks down point values for everything. And on the interview part, this has 11 questions. Each district may choose to do theirs differently. Some districts may only ask 8 questions. And if that happens, points will be weighted to equal 150 in this section either way. So each question may go from 10 points to 12 points if they ask fewer or more. But either way, it'll balance out to 150 points regardless. So once again, you have an application that is scored, your interview portion is scored. There'll also be a written exam that can cover anything from FFA history and knowledge to agriculture issues, industry questions, that kind of thing, Alabama FFA history. And all of that is detailed and outlined a little better in the officer candidate handbook. And finally, that written response is also covered in there. So this is how we rank candidates and we select candidates. So interviews are currently set for March the 12th, I believe, in each district. That's a Friday. And that information will go out soon as far as locations. And then we will have these applications, as always, will be due emailed to your district specialist by March 1st. If you have any questions at all, please reach out to one of us. We are more than happy to help, and we are looking forward to the next group of great leaders within our association. So thank you so much for your time.